Hey guys, today we're going to talk about a basic overview of poultry. Poultry is widely used through everything from fine dining to fast food chains and everything in between. There's a lot going on with use of poultry these days, and there's quite a few different birds that are in that group that you're commonly exposed to. You talk about Thanksgiving, there's turkey. Roasted chicken is a common menu item in a lot of places throughout the country. There's duck. You've heard of duck l'orange, maybe if you've eaten at a French restaurant, or duck confit. And then there's also goose, which is also sometimes commonly used by chefs during the holidays, Christmas time, roasted goose. Before me, there is your average chicken. You can find it at a grocery store or any butcher shop. I prefer going to a butcher shop where you can source an all-natural or humanely raised product these days. When you shop at the major grocery stores, there tends to be a lot of hormones, antibiotics, and poor treatment of the birds. So try to see if you can find yourself at a butcher shop or a Whole Foods compared to some of the other broadline grocery companies. We start off, we have our bird. This area right here is the chicken breast that some of you are probably very familiar with. We have our wingtips and our wings. We get back to the lovely drumsticks that you can find in a cryovac package in your meat section at your local grocery store. And then we're gonna flip the bird over. So on the underside of the chicken, you'll find the spine. This is also where the thighs are that are attached to your drumsticks. You're going to use the entire bird. Once you've butchered this down, you're going to use the carcass to make a chicken stock. Once you've learned the in and outs of a chicken, you've learned the anatomy of a turkey, a duck, and a goose as well. They're all going to be butchered in a very similar manner. If you're not familiar with poultry and you're not familiar with chicken, turkey, you have to be aware that there is a lot of opportunity for foodborne illness if you're not careful in handling the product. Chicken in particular, turkey as well, are known to potentially have salmonella, which is a foodborne illness that can be extremely harmful, leads to illness, possibly even death if you're not handling the product correctly. When you're working with a product like this, you want to make sure to keep your station clean, minimize any debris falling around the area. If you do make a mess, you want to immediately wash, rinse, and sanitize the area that you're working. Obviously, I've been handling this bird with my hand. I'm not going to go over to another part of the kitchen and start working with vegetables. That's going to cross-contaminate and risk illness to anyone that would consume that other product. So you always want to be very cognizant and aware of, when dealing with poultry, that the next thing you do after touching, and you touch here and you touch there, you've then contaminated those areas. You're going to need to immediately wash, rinse, and sanitize that area to ensure that there's no risk of foodborne illness. So when we're continuing to talk about proper handling and safety with poultry, you don't want to have this out for too long. If you're getting ready to cook it and work with it, half an hour to an hour is perfectly fine. You want your proteins at room temperature when you're cooking them so it doesn't shock and stress the meat. But if you've gotten this home from the grocery store and you're unpacking your groceries and something comes up and you need to run an errand, or phone call comes up, you want to put this in refrigeration. Anything below 40 degrees is ideal temperature for preventing any foodborne illness or contamination in your poultry products. Then you want to talk on the other side of the spectrum. Well, what temperature does it need to be when I'm cooking it? Whether you're working with chicken, turkey, goose, or duck, when you're cooking it, you want to cook it thoroughly to 165 degrees. The best way to check is either using a probe thermometer, and you always want to check by the thighs and the leg area. That dark meat that you may or may not have heard of before. The breast is considered the white meat in the turkeys and the chickens of the world. And then you have your dark meat, which not everybody loves, but I think is delicious. And that's going to be in this area. So you want to stick your probe thermometer in here. If you're more experienced working with poultry, there's also the field test, firmness. Once it starts to feel firm, like Julia Childs used to say back in the day on her show, that's when you know it's done. If you're not sure and you're working with a whole bird, you can always just take your knife and cut it open to check for doneness. Now that we've talked about food safety, handling of the product when it comes to poultry, and the temperatures that you need to be aware of, we're going to talk about how to cook it. When it comes to poultry, there's many different ways you can cook chicken, turkey, duck, and goose. Keep in mind that those are all part of the same family. Once you've gotten your chicken out, you can go as simple as trussing a chicken and roasting it whole, which would essentially be bringing all of it together using twine or even the skin by making simple skewers. Seasoning it with whatever your preference is. I like to go oil, salt, pepper, herbs, maybe a little bit of lemon and garlic. You can stuff some into the carcass of the chicken, herbs, spices, garlic, some cloves, maybe some onions, whatever you want to do. But then you can pop it in the oven. I like to do 300 degrees. Some people say 350. The slower and lower the temperature, you're going to retain more moisture. You get a nice golden brown. You're not going to risk burning. The higher the temperature, it's going to cook outside to inside. So if you're rolling at a 350 or higher, you can have some burning going on the skin before you have the meat cooked all the way through. So I would suggest 300. Some guys even go as low as 250 degrees. It's going to take a lot longer, maybe a couple hours instead of 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the size of your bird. But you're going to get a great end product. It's going to be extremely moist, delicate, juicy. Once you get past cooking the whole bird, you can break it down into sections. You can saute chicken, you can grill chicken, you can confit. You hear duck confit. It's cooking in its own fat. It's the renderings of duck fat and submerging. You can do turkey, you can do goose, any one of these products. Usually do that with the dark meat, which you find back here. Keep in mind, that's the drumsticks and the thighs. Some chefs in modern restaurants do the sous vide, where they cryovac and they cook it in a water bath. You also can save the carcass and some of the bones and some of the meat and cook it in water and create chicken stock. Break down your chicken, save the carcass, submerge it in some water with some vegetables and some herbs. Bring it to a boil, turn it down to a simmer, let it go for a few hours. You're gonna see that nice flavor and color develop in your broth, and that's great to make chicken noodle soup for your kids if they're sick or on a cold day. Poultry is extremely versatile, and there's many things you can do with it when it comes to cooking and consuming.